afternoon, period 6B. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. So hopefully we're getting kind of into a good swing of things, that there's things you're doing on your own and some videos you watch. And I even have probably at least one next week where the assignment's going to be like read and take notes and watch the video and take notes, and we'll talk in class. And then like next week, my plan is we're going to spend some class time doing a little bit of guided reading. You kind of had some videos walk you through reading Federalist 10 and reading Brutus 1. We're going to do some of that together where we can kind of see how each other's doing and that sort of thing. So trying to adapt to this new normal. Reach out to me. I am available. We can do office hours. We can do whatever. I'm recording most classes, so you can go back. You're not going to see like what's here in the room, but you are going to see what's on the screen and hear what at least I have to say. So before we get into talking about Schoology calendar, oh, that's what I forgot to do with period 3. Okay. Start with this question. So what do you know about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Yes.
Heard that puts the Supreme Court out of the previous 5-4 with a swing vote, so that it was no longer so that if depending on what judge gets in, it could be out of equilibrium.
Right. So right now we have, you said 5-4, so there's 9 justices on the court. Right now we have 8. Even number, you know, can be a problem. Yes. Second woman appointed to the Supreme Court. In fact, the first woman, they're both up here on my bulletin board. Ooh, wow, Mr. Pereira, bulletin board, very cool. What's up with that? I'm in high school. Why are you making cute bulletin boards? Because it amuses me, okay? But when I did this, I took the big ideas that the College Board had and I made them kind of cute. And when I was thinking about, like, you know, make them like a thought because they're an idea, I said, I'll have James Madison on constitutionalism. He is the father of the Constitution. Makes a lot of sense. Competing policy interests, I thought, why not have the 2 candidates of the election this year? They're competing for, and they represent a lot of interest. But for liberty and order, I thought of, let's have some Supreme Court justices. And since we already had like a white guy thing going, I thought, why not have the first woman appointed, who is Sandra Day O'Connor, appointed by President Reagan, and then the second, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Had no idea this was going to go this way when I made this, but there you go. Yes? Yeah, Columbia Law, I believe, which is not that's not a slouching kind of school. And I believe she tied for first, but top of the class. That's a huge deal, okay?
Another thing I know is that she wasn't the greatest in Native American rights, is what I've been told.
So that's one thing about the justices. They have to make decisions on the law for a variety of issues around the law, okay? So when it came to, and I don't know her record on Native American rights, but
I think that because my brother is studying a lot of that Native American
right.
stuff with his college major, so I don't know that more.
Sure, got it. So with that, she's a Supreme Court justice. She was a lawyer for a long time. She filed a lot of lawsuits over the years when she worked for the American Civil Liberties Union, particularly ones that were unfair to women. There was a time in this country where to get a checking account, a woman would have to get a man, her dad or her husband, to co-sign for that, or for a credit card, or for a mortgage on a house, whereas men did not have to do that, and fought for that. She's considered one of our more liberal justices. And of course, she's in the news this week because she died on Friday, last Friday. And this is the way a course like this goes. I walked out of here last Friday like I'm planning for next week, woo, and then stuff happens, okay? And she died, meaning there's an opening on the Supreme Court that was already suggested. So I want to take a few minutes, and it relates to things we're doing in this class. It helps us go over some of the basics. And so I just want to kind of go over a couple of things that, let's do that. Okay, we'll start from here. So you kind of have a hint where we're going. So our government, set up under the Constitution, has 3 branches. This was part of you know, part of this is part of the Great Compromise, but the founding fathers believed in the principle of limited government. We're going to give different jobs to different parts of the government. So help me out here. This should be quick refresher for us. What are the three branches? Legislative, executive, and I heard judicial. By the way, they were said in this order, but I am writing them also in this order for a reason beyond the way they were said. When we start to look at the Constitution, and you're going to want to start to delve into it, I have links in the resources folder with some of our foundational documents. It might be worth doing kind of a skim of the Constitution. The Constitution is divided into main sections called articles. Article 1 is all about the legislative branch. Somewhat lengthy, kind of detailed. Article 2 is all about the executive branch. Kind of, sort of lengthy, kind of detailed. Lengthy compared to some others. Article 3 is all about the judicial branch. And then there's a couple other articles after that. Article 3, kind of short, kind of sort of vague. And we've had to develop our court system since then. Okay? So what do we call our three branches here in America? Here in the USA? Congress. What's for executive? Say it again. That's the president and vice president and their various departments under them. Judicial branch is the Supreme Court of the United States. We can affectionately call it SCOTUS. And you'll notice when you go into your resources, I have a folder of SCOTUS court decisions. Not all of them, but some really important ones. And the lower courts. So the passing of Justice Ginsburg is kind of a big deal, okay? She was a member of that, and we have to talk about, you know, kind of replacing her, or at least filling her vacancy. I don't like to use the word replace, okay? Supreme Court makes decisions on a variety of laws, and that brings me to kind of our next point, which is what does each do with the law? So let's talk about that for a second. What does the legislative branch or Congress do with the law? Makes laws, right? This is like, you know, from 7th grade, remember this. How about the executive branch? Say it again. Enforces the law, carries out the law, executes the law. Okay. So, you know, back in Britain, you know, a lot of centralized power. The same people making the rules are the same ones enforcing it and deciding how it's enforced. Okay. And then the judicial branch, of course, interprets the laws, determines that they are constitutional. So the Supreme Court is a big deal. Their interpretations, their decisions, which sometimes come down to a 5-4 vote, they're close sometimes, have an impact. So for example, can the school search your locker? Like, who uses lockers? But let's imagine it's middle school. Back in middle school, could they search your lockers? Yes. And that was determined by the Supreme Court because there was a challenge to schools searching lockers about, you know, our rights to privacy and so on. But the Supreme Court determined that the school acts what they call en loco parentis. And you're like, that sounds like, you know, Latin for crazy parents. I suppose, but what it really means is in place of, think of loco like location, in location or in place of the parent, that we have certain responsibilities to you as a parent would, okay? And so we have to balance that though with our rights and so on. Can you wear a Trump 2020 t-shirt or a Biden 2020 t-shirt in school? Yes, you can as a student, and that's been, whether you, wearing political slogans, you can do that. Now, If there's other parts of the slogan that violate, if they throw in some F-bombs or whatever, you can't do that. But you can you have rights to your political expression as a student. Can I wear a T-shirt with a political slogan? No, I can't. I really shouldn't. Okay. As much as I love to think you're all here for my teaching and wit and charm and rugged good looks, you're a captive audience. You have to come to school. Okay. And so I can't put that on you. And some people are like, would you have political freedom? I do. Okay. And what I put in my front yard and what I express as a private citizen. Okay. I can try my best. Yes. And I'm going to try my best this year. And if not, Walker's going to tell me stop. Okay. Actually, what do I got today? I got the Mona Lisa today. Okay. So with all of that, one other thing I want to throw out there, it has to do with Congress. This is going to be important in a few minutes, you'll see, is we have to remember that when they set up the three branches, Congress, they limited. Another way is in that they created two houses. We call it a bicameral legislature. Do you remember the names of the two houses? Right, okay. House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay? So keep that in mind. So what I want to do just for a few minutes is I want to play a news clip for you from CNN 10. Have you seen CNN 10? A couple of you saw it. Some of you saw it like, yeah, I saw an A-push. I know. Current Events does that sometimes. This won't happen all the time, I promise, okay? But in CNN 10, you might have watched some in middle school or in global. I didn't show any, I think, last year in A-push. But CNN puts out a 10-minute news clip every day during the school year, every weekday. And if you're like, I don't have time to watch the news all the time, you could probably watch these 10 minutes. There's also podcasts out there that are like, I listened to one called Axios today. It's like 10 minutes. I can listen to it on my way to school and get at least some information that helps me understand current events a little bit. So I want to play part of Monday's clip from CNN 10 here for you. That deals with the passing of Justice Ginsburg.
21 days into the month of September, and on the last official day of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, we welcome you to CNN 10. I'm Carl Azus, back in our home studio. Outside the U.S. Supreme Court, memorials appeared over the weekend. They were in remembrance of Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away last Friday at the age of 87. In the Supreme Court's announcement of her death, Chief Justice John Roberts said America has lost a jurist of historic stature and that the Supreme Court has lost a cherished colleague. Justice Ginsburg had been battling pancreatic cancer since 2009. She'd served on the High Court since 1993 when she was nominated by President Bill Clinton. Ginsburg was the second woman to serve on the court. Before that, she'd worked as a law clerk, a law professor, a U.S. appeals court judge, and a lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union. Women's rights was a deeply important issue to the Associate Justice.
In my lifetime, I expect to see 3, 4, perhaps even more women on the High Court bench, women not shaped from the same mold. Mold of different complexions. I surely would not be in this room today without the determined efforts of men and women who kept dreams of equal citizenship alive.
In recent years, Ginsburg served as the most senior member of the High Court's liberal justices. She took a liberal position in her votes on a number of controversial issues, from abortion to immigration to healthcare. But Ginsburg also shared a close friendship with Associate Justice Antonin Scalia, who was known for his conservative positions until his death in 2016.
This is really critical in our day and age of people like trying to own each other on social media about politics, is they happen to mention her friendship with one particular justice, Antonin Scalia. Justice Scalia was, in a lot of ways, probably one of the most conservative justices we've had. He interpreted the Constitution and he ruled on things oftentimes opposite of what Ruth Bader Ginsburg would, okay? And yet they were colleagues with each other, they were collegial to each other, respectful, but they even mentioned that they were friends, as in they and their spouses went out to dinner together. They and their spouses went to the opera together. That was something they held in common. They liked the opera, okay? My point is, we can have political differences with folks and we can still talk with them and learn from them and do it in a way that's mature. I think Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg were a pretty good example of that, and I just wanted to highlight that. And they did, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. That's going to be really critical.
At that time, there was a political controversy over Justice Scalia's replacement, and it seems history is repeating itself ahead of the process to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, serve for life. That's why presidents regard these judicial appointments as such an important way to extend their own legacies. The Constitution does not set out a resume that a Supreme Court justice has to have. There's no requirement in the Constitution that a Supreme Court justice even be a lawyer. But traditionally, presidents have nominated impeccably qualified sitting judges. Both presidents and senators like to say that the confirmation process is all about qualifications, but it's really also about politics. Virtually every important issue in American politics and even American life winds up in front of the Supreme Court. And they have the last word, both the president and the senators trying to figure out how the nominee stands on the hot button issues that the Supreme Court deals with. And that's why the senators will vote yes or no.
And it is the responsibility of the Senate to confirm or deny presidential nominees to the High Court. That's established by the Advice and Consent Clause of the U.S. Constitution. But a political fight is brewing over the timing of appointing Justice Ginsburg's replacement. Generally speaking, Republicans want to appoint conservative justices to the Supreme Court, though they don't have to vote that way. Democrats want to appoint liberal justices to the Supreme Court, though they don't have to vote that way. The president is a Republican, and the Senate is controlled by Republicans. So with an election coming in November, it may benefit Republicans to try to nominate and vote on Ginsburg's replacement now while they control the White House and Senate. This could help them appoint another conservative to the court. It may benefit Democrats to try to delay the process until the new year in the hopes their party will win control of the White House and/or Senate. That could help them appoint another liberal to the court. Of course, it's a gamble any way you look at it because neither party knows what will happen in the election and both parties want to look good to voters going into it. We will be following this controversy in more detail this week. As far as the current makeup of the Supreme Court goes, 5 of its members were appointed by Republican presidents, 3 of its members were appointed by Democratic presidents. 10-second trivia.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Answer's Colorado, though. Okay, so when we look at the Supreme Court nomination, okay, who picks the nominee? President, okay? And the president will appoint a nominee. And you'll hear like a lot of, chatter in social media, like, oh, he can't do that. He can. President Trump can nominate whoever he wants. Okay. He actually a few weeks ago came out with a kind of a short list of people he was interested in for the court, planning for the future. He can do that. Okay. President has appointed a nominee, but who determines whether or not that nominee is going to become a justice or not? The Senate. So one thing you got to understand here is that the two houses, while they both make laws, they do have some different jobs. And so it is the Senate's job to have a hearing, and the Senate can decide kind of when to do that, and then to vote on that nominee. And in our history, we've had nominees for the Supreme Court who have been not get granted, that seat. Okay. You mentioned that Justice Scalia died in an election year. He died in February of 2016. And in that year, the president was President Barack Obama. He's a Democrat. And he had a nominee. He nominated a justice judge named Merrick Garland. The Senate was and still is controlled by the Republicans. The Republicans have a majority. They have like 50-something seats out of 100. Yes, and the majority leader is a senator from Kentucky named Mitch McConnell. And Senator McConnell, being the majority leader, said we're gonna wait on this. We're gonna wait on this hearing and vote because it's an election year. We know President Obama is leaving in January. It's his second term, so he's done, and we want to wait for the next president. Okay, and there was a big debate over whether you can wait all those months or not. Correct. That
now they want it the other way around.
Right.
So it's closer to the election.
Right.
It's close to the election, and they want to do the other to elect, and then even
right.
Close to the election and early voting has already started.
Right. So that's where the debate is that now that the tables are turned a little bit, you still have a Republican-controlled Senate. Mitch McConnell is still the Senate Majority Leader. But now you have a Republican president. President Trump will make a nomination. He has every right to do that. There's going to be a lot of pressure. Should you wait? Justice Ginsburg died on September 18th. The election's on November 3rd, and so we'll see what happens. But it's understood that the Supreme Court is a huge deal. If they have more of a conservative majority, that makes a lot of conservatives happy that they're going to make rulings that they feel aren't going to change laws, too greatly. And it goes the other way, that if there's more of a liberal majority, that's the concern. Okay, the other way. So we just kind of have to see. But the timing is interesting. This is a very historic kind of thing, and I wanted to give you a little bit of context on that. It very much relates to this. We should know the structure of our government a little bit. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about our government. We're going to do some quick notes on that, on some of the things we're working on in your lessons, your remote lessons, okay? But I just wanted you to kind of think about this a little bit as we move forward, okay? Questions? One thing I forgot to do this with period 3 today. It's like hard to keep up. I do want to mention one thing about Schoology. It may be worth your while. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you're seniors. A lot of us use the upcoming over here to keep up with assignments. That's awesome. But if you ever get behind, it happens to all of us at times, even the best of students might get a day or two behind, and you're trying to catch up. You're like, oh, where's that assignment? I think we have a pretty good system this year that you can look in the weekly folders and figure it out. But I wanted to point out to you, you also have the calendar on Schoology, okay? And on the calendar, okay, on the calendar here at the top, you can choose which calendars you want to see. I have my classes that I take. Courses are with little notebooks. You're like, well, why do you uncheck some of your courses? Because it's like study hall, and there's some faculty courses I belong to. I belong to a lot of groups, and I've unchecked a number of them. I have checked off the school ones. because, you know, there's school events and things like that that they put up there. But the other thing I love about this calendar, okay, is that you can color code each class, okay? So like, you know, this class I made kind of purple, and what's nice is now on my calendar I can kind of see which class is which. So at the top you'll see something that says something of something calendars, whatever your number is, and you tap on that. So on the left side you check off which ones you want to see, and then on the right you'll see a colored box. They're probably all the same color right now. If you tap on that, you can choose a color for each course. So that's kind of nice. Like I got some math, oh, it's the green or whatever color you pick. I don't care what color you pick for, you know, that's up to you, okay? Got that? The other thing that's nice is then you can kind of see, holy cow, I got a lot due, you know, I had a lot due on Monday or whatever. And this is nice because you can go back. Oh, I forgot to get that thing done last week. I can go back and find it. And what's really great is from the calendar, you can just tap on it and there it is. You can actually tap on, you know, there's the directions at least, due date and directions. And then you can tap view item and it takes you right to it. Okay, so I just want to throw that out as, you know, time management's a huge thing you're going to need for college. When they give you tools, it's great. Somewhere in the settings, and I couldn't tell you how to do it because it's a one-time thing and I did it like 3 years ago, you can actually sync it with your phone calendar. And so when I'm like looking for my doctor's appointments, I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of assignments. What's wrong with me? I'm giving these, you know, well, I'm not giving the kids too many assignments, but you know, I'm like, holy cow, there's a lot of assignments there. So it's kind of up to you. All right. But I'll tell you, you know, Schoology calendar, your phone calendar, you know, it really can help us stay organized, but you got to get in the habit. So I just want to throw that out there. Okay. Cool. All right. A little quicker than I was with APUsh with that. All right. So, what I want to talk about, though, is a couple of things you're working around. Is you were working around the Articles of Confederation. That was topic like 1.4. In fact, I switched to the topics in order because it didn't make sense to me to talk about the Federalists and Anti-Federalists when we haven't talked about what happened before that. You know, there's a little bit of historical piece to this particular unit, more so than others. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about, we're sort of going to talk federalism, but I more so want to talk about forms of government, getting a little bit into political theory here, if you will, okay? And so I just want to talk about a couple of things here. I'm not going to go through every single slide. I believe I dropped these into one of the assignments. If I haven't, I'll put a link to it in there. I can drop, no, I dropped it in resources. That's what I did. It's in resources. I have like unit folders, you know, in there, starting with unit 1. So here's the thing. Government's about power, okay? A lot of what government politics is about is power. Who has it? Who do we give it to, okay? And the way governments are set up is really about distribution of power, okay? Do we all keep it in one place? Do we spread it out, all right? And when we go back to the story of the United States, when we go back to the American Revolution, of course the United States is part of that story, but what other country is also a huge part of that story? Great Britain, okay? Great Britain, you know, yeah, France helped, I know, but Great Britain is. And Great Britain was very much what we call a unitary system, so was France, meaning all the power is held by the central government. And if you remember, this is a lot of what the revolutionaries were railing against. There's too much power in the hands of the king and of Parliament. The Declaration of Independence, the second big section, really is about all the abuses he did. Okay? So when they formed their new government, they declare independence. They create new state constitutions. You got to do that. Each state had to have their own set of rules. They're not colonies anymore. And when they created a national government, they created what's called the Articles of Confederation. They said, we're going to go to the opposite extreme. We're going to spread the power out big time. We're going to go from very centralized power to its way spread out in what's called a confederation style of government. We don't want a really strong central government. We want things at the local level. Now, there's pros and cons to both, right? What's an advantage of all the power being in one place? Let's say we make Liam the king. What's the advantage to that? He'll make decisions, he'll make them fast. Okay? We'll get stuff done. What's the disadvantage? He might make some bad decisions. It's all on him.
There's no government if you kill him. If you kill that man, the government's gone.
Well, usually they have a plan in place as to who's next, but still, you know, there's problems in that he might abuse our rights. He doesn't understand the rest of us, you know, and so on and so forth. So they went to the opposite extreme. You make decisions over here, you make decisions over there. We're going to put things really at the state level. Now, last year in APUSH, I used the analogy of the remember the minivan, the sports car? Some of you? Yeah. Have you heard this? Right? Okay. So if the central government is sort of like your parents' car, minivan, you're like, I want something that's like so not minivan. And so you get a fancy sports car and you're cool and you're driving it. But as life goes on and you meet that special someone and you start having kids, a sports car is a terrible idea. There's nowhere to put the kid. And we talked about how it's naughty to even consider trunking the kid. Okay? Okay. So they end up with the Constitution, when they try to rewrite the Articles of Confederation, they end up with a federal style of government. Okay? So we kind of talked pros and cons. I'm not going to go all through that. The Confederation is very voluntary. Not only do you have to volunteer, your state has to volunteer to join, your state has to volunteer for everything. You guys want to raise taxes? No, we're out, okay? So the Articles of Confederation, this first form of government, had some serious failures. There's things they couldn't do. And we talked about the problems with that. They can't raise money to get things done. They can't really raise an army to deal with things like Shays' Rebellion. They can't print and coin a national currency. Like, different states had their own currency. It creates problems in the economy. It creates confusion.
One big country at that point, you know, really.
What's that?
They don't have a national really anything, so
Right.
really be considered a one big country.
Right. So when they form the new Constitution, they say we're going to have what's called a federal system. Okay, so here's kind of how each looks. So unitary system in Britain, national government kind of tells the other parts of the country. In Britain, they have, like, you know, counties. Some countries have like provinces. They're going to tell them what to do. And there are countries in the world that still pull this off somewhat successfully. Some people argue, why is it successful in Japan or the UK or Sweden? And some would say, well, they're smaller countries. They're maybe not as diverse as the US. Okay. And so they keep that in mind. So, like, you know, over the course of the last 6 months, my wife and I have found ourselves watching a lot of Hulu and Amazon Prime, and which people have been doing. And we love watching British detective shows. Okay. And I learned something, like, their police system is like kind of one system. Like, you could be a detective in London and you could get transferred to another city or whatever. Whereas in our country, we have, you know, the city of Canandaigua Police Force, we have the county sheriff's department, we have the New York State Police. Okay, I found that really kind of interesting. The Confederation system they moved to, so opposite extreme, the states have power over the national government. And we talked a bit about how that really didn't work. It's maybe too spread out. So they came up with this federation system, where the people basically give authority. So their authority is they're giving permission to have power to both the states and the national government. Okay? And we're going to explore this more a little bit next week in terms of, you know, the states have certain things only they can do. For example, the states are in charge of licensing, right? You got a New York State driver's license, all right? You couldn't get your permit till you were 16, can't drive till you're 16, or get a license till you're 16 and a half. Meanwhile, maybe you have a cousin in North Carolina that could get their permit at 15, because North Carolina has different rules about it, okay? When it comes to driver's licenses and hunting licenses and fishing licenses and marriage licenses. You need a license to get married? Yes, you do. Okay, done by the state, okay? All right. Whereas the federal government can wage war. New York cannot invade Pennsylvania or invade Canada. Okay. Both, and then there's jobs both can do. We're going to look at that more. Both can tax us, for example. Both build and maintain roads. Okay. So keep that in mind. All right. Now, that federal constitution, we call that federalism, that kind of balance between the national and state governments. Okay. And James Madison said this about both governments. He said both are, in fact, different agents and trustees of the people constituted with different powers. I want you to think about that. They are agents and trustees of the people. An agent acts on your behalf, right? Okay? If it's a secret agent, they're acting on the behalf of their country. If it's like you're a talent agent or a sports agent, right? Okay? If you're like a professional athlete, your agent is kind of in charge of negotiating your contract on your behalf and so on. Okay? But they're also trustees of the people. Okay? We entrust them with the power we have. Okay? And they're constituted with different powers, he said. So we make sure to limit our government that they have different powers. Now, there's kind of a sense of division there, all right? And you need to understand, you don't want to confuse that with the three branches with separation of powers. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about kind of how they sort of work together, all right? Now, one of the things that will come up is, could we have a conflict between a federal law and a state law? Absolutely. Yeah, okay. So Jefferson said this is an agreement between the states, a product of an agreement. As Hamilton said, okay, he said, if their rights are invaded by either, they can make use of the other as the instrument of redress. In other words, you can say, you know, people do that all the time, you know, like, well, if you like the federal law, you're like, well, federal government said this, you know, it's sort of like, you know, trying to get answers from mom and dad almost, right? None of you ever did that, right, as kids? Like mom gave an answer and you didn't like it, so you went to dad. Some of you know, and some of you know which one was the one that was the softie, right? You know, you knew which one was wrapped around your little finger, okay? All right? You know, who's going to say no, all right? Someone has played that game. But he's saying, like, that could be a good thing. That can protect you, okay? So when we talk about that, we have what's called a supremacy clause. It basically says federal law can trump state laws. So states cannot refuse to pay federal taxes. That was determined in the early 1800s. The Whiskey Rebellion is kind of about that. States cannot refuse to obey or nullify federal laws. We did that back in, you know, we looked at that last year. You did in your U.S. history classes. And in the nullification crisis between, you know, over tariffs between Jackson and John C. Calhoun. Okay, states cannot secede. The Civil War kind of answered that. Okay. That's all the historic examples. You don't have to see that, all that. Okay, let's talk current. So for example, this is really hard to read now. The Affordable Care Act, okay? There are states that are pushing back on the Affordable Care Act, like this is going to require us to do certain things. Medicaid, but of course the one Walker just mentioned here, immigration, you know, can states, you know, violate immigration laws? So some states, particularly more liberal states, are saying they can have sanctuary cities. Some states are insisting, especially ones along the border, that the federal government needs to put a border there. But this is a huge question, is the legalization of marijuana. 31 states have legalized it for medical purposes. 9 have legalized it for recreational purposes. You mean like have recreation with marijuana? Yes, it means exactly that, okay? If people want to get high, right? And so you can kind of see this map has some of the states that have done that. But the issue becomes, physician-assisted suicide is another one, okay? The issue with that becomes, there's still federal law in the books that says that marijuana is a controlled substance. Federal government really hasn't moved on this. So you go to Colorado, People buy marijuana for recreational purposes or medical reasons. And the challenge they run into is technically they are violating federal law. And so we're going to have to see how that plays out in years to come. Okay. Here in New York, it's for medical reasons, but there's been chatter that it could be for recreational purposes as well. Eventually, it could be legalized here. What does that exactly mean? It's against federal law to have a physician-assisted suicide. Someone's on, suffering terribly from pancreatic cancer, and their life is not going to get any better. Okay, can they have a physician help them to pass away? And it's legal in some places, but it raises questions about federal law. We're going to look at that. Questions?
No.
Reach out to me. I know this is tough when we only see each other once a week. Honestly makes me sad. I like seeing you guys a little bit more.